Hey, welcome back to my channel. Appreciate you stopping by, and got a little something here for you. Basically, I'm helping out a friend of mine that has torn his antenna off of his all-in-one whoop board. He's got a really cool 3-inch quad, but it uses a beta FPV all-in-one board. So basically, we're dealing with the Frsky receiver that's built into the board. Okay, just like the Mobula 6, it uses this silicon wire. Okay, so he's torn this off and just trying to figure out how to get this fixed. That antenna is gone, whatever the case may be. So that's what this video is about. We're gonna fix that issue for him. We're going to also make a modified version that's gonna be better. So let's check it out. All right, first of all, what we're dealing with here is we have this antenna that's sticking off. Okay, this is a brushed, older board. Okay, I don't know how old it is, but this board I think this is the first Whoop board that Beta FPV came out with that had a built-in receiver. Okay, so this is an Frsky built-in receiver, and the Mobula 6, it has a built-in Frsky receiver as well. Now I want you to make sure we're not getting confused here. Okay, we're dealing with the receiver. Okay, this little pad right here. See that? We're not dealing with the VTX. Okay, over here is the VTX. It's a solid, on the Mobula 6, it's a solid wire. Okay, and it has the two ground pads. You see those two pads on either side of that wire? So there's the wire, and then there's a pad here and a pad here. That's the VTX. We're not dealing with that in this video. We're dealing with just this receiver. It has one single pad. So what's the deal here? Okay, basically they have the same thing going on, and you think, hey, you know, that doesn't make any sense, because all the receivers I've ever seen or whatever, they look like this. They got a little IPEX connector, they got the black stuff and the active element. Okay, basically what they've done is they've chopped all of this off all the way up to here, and they've only soldered on the active element part. Okay, it's a single strand of wire with no ground shield. So in other words, if you wanted to, you could just cut that off, solder that in place, and you're done. You're back to square. That's the way the manufacturer did it. This active element is 33 millimeters. Okay, it's actually 33. I think it's 32.8 millimeters. Okay, so that's all you have to do. Just go ahead and cut that off of a aftermarket antenna. I got a whole bag of these. I'll try to find a link for you and put it in the description. But basically, you can just take that little active element, cut it right there, strip a little of that insulation off, and solder that on, and you're good to go. If you want to, you can modify it to where you're using about that much of the ground strap. That way, you can get it up out of your quadcopter. Okay. So you can solder that in, and then you can have a zip tie on there. Because, you know, with a Whoop, probably especially a 65, even this one, I don't fly these outside. I don't fly these in big giant areas or whatever. But I do this guy. I fly him, you know, some good distance. This thing is just under 23 grams. And it's pretty fun. But anyway, we're going to do both sides. We're gonna show you how to just stick it on there and be done with it, or else I'm gonna also show you how to modify a better solution for your antenna. Okay. Now I've already filmed this actually doing it, because I built one for him and I set it outside for him to pick up. This antenna, it's just so small. I'm trying to film this for you, explaining it. I just thought it was a mess. So what I'd like to do is kind of go through and explain what's going on in the guts here, and then I'm going to draw what needs to happen. Okay. So these antennas came off of my R-xsr. This is my this is for my channel. I do all kinds of silly stuff with that thing. But here's an aftermarket. This is the way it comes. Okay, you can see it's relatively, I mean, it's really long. And I purchased these on purpose because of my rescue drone. So that's 150, almost 155 millimeters in length. Now, if you want to, you can cut them down. Okay. So you can see here the active element sticking out is the same length. Okay. We don't need all of that stuff. Okay, here's another one I'm ready to make. What covers this? Okay, so the active element inside is a single wire, and then that single wire is insulated. And then for these type of antennas, there's a ground shield so that this is 2.4 gigahertz from here to here, and it's broadcasting from that element. If you have a shroud, you see this right here? If you have this shroud over top of that element, it can't broadcast. That ground kills the signal, okay? So basically, the manufacturer of Beta FPV and Mobula, and they've basically just taken that active element and soldered it onto the flight controller, and that's it. So if that's what you want to do, you can. So just real quick, this active element is what we're talking about. You just have it's just a single strand of wire. It might be real thin strands, you know, twisted together super tight. So you have a single strand, and then it's insulated. Okay, so you have some sort of insulation on it. If you want to, you can cut that. Okay, and you can just have a little bit of insulation, and then you just trim off the end, and then you can tin this wire, and that's it. You're done. Solder that onto your board, and you're back to square. However, if you want to modify it and have better range, because there's something called EMF, electromagnetic force. If you want to look it up in the dictionary, it's a good read. But basically, all these components, especially all these all-in-one boards, have the MOSFETs, all the electronics going, the current running through it. You have other things going on. So there's going to be a little bit of interference with this setup, because that's trying to broadcast from the whole entire element. Okay? And then you have your canopy here, and you have other electronics and wires going by, and you have your camera and your VTX and all this stuff. So all this interference is happening on this part of your active element. The only part that doesn't have any interference is what little bit is sticking up above all of that stuff. Okay? So if we want to modify the antenna and make a better situation for ourselves, we can get rid of that. Okay, and we can take our smaller piece, okay, and we can cut it right about here. So we're going to use the active element, and then we're going to use about that much of ground. Okay, now let's take a closer look at how we do that. So here's our active element, okay, and it has a very thin amount of insulation. And then around that is the ground strap. So then this is it's like you remember the Chinese fingers, thumb cuffs, you'd put one end on one end here, and you couldn't pull it apart, because as you pull it apart it would tighten up on you. That's basically what this is. It's just a mesh of wire that's tight around the insulation of that element. Okay, and then this part here goes to the connector. So you have your connector on the end, okay, and then inside that connector is the active element. So this part connects to here, and then all of this wire connects to here, and it's insulated. They're not touching each other. Okay? So when we come in to it and we grab our antenna, we're going to cut it right here. This part here is in the trash, or if you want to, you can do what I did and just make a smaller antenna and keep that for later. So anyway, we're dealing with just this section right here. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to, after we cut that, we're going to trim back some of this insulation. We're going to remove that. Okay? So here's a little earlier what I filmed of how to do that. Okay, so we're going to just utilize a very small portion of this antenna for the active element. Only just a little bit needs to stick out for us to solder onto that little pad. But what we need to do is we need to create a ground. So we're going to have a jumper. Okay? So what we want to do is we can come up a little bit further, so we can work on the active element part later. Let's first get our ground working. Okay? So very delicately we want to kind of scrape away this insulation. Okay? We'll just take off a little bit of this. You got to kind of be delicate with it, because if you cut all those little tiny wires inside there, it's going to be worthless. Okay, so now we've taken off this little bit of insulation and we've exposed this little ground strap. Okay, I don't know if you can see that or not. So that little mesh of wire right there is what we're going to work with. Okay, so what we want to do is just very delicately push that like a Chinese lantern. We're just going to push that ground straps up off of that active element. Okay? And you want to make sure you get all of it off of that active element. Okay? We're just going to try to be as delicate as we can to roll that little bit of wire back. Okay? See how I'm kind of just pushing that back. Okay, so now we've exposed the active element and there's no more wire on there. Now we can roll that all the way around. Okay, so now we got our little ground package, if you will. We can pull this down a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm trying to film this for you and then for him, you know. For you, Brother Ray. But you see how we got all that ground kind of pushed back there? Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to get a really small silicon wire. Okay, I have some 30 gauge wire here, and doesn't matter what color. And I'm going to make this long because I don't know where he might need to route this to. I'm actually not going to solder this in on my quadcopter because my antenna is fine. I don't want to mess with it right now. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a really small wire here, and we're just going to strip about 1/4 of an inch. Okay? Maybe a little bit more. Okay? So now we have this exposed. Twist this up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take that and we're going to wrap that around. See if I can zoom in here for you. We're going to wrap this around that ground. Okay? Nothing like having giant fingers. I don't know if they're giant. I'm 6'3", so my hands are a little bit big for some of this stuff, but I'll give it a shot. All right. So now that we have that wrapped around there, that is created our ground jumper. Okay. So I'm gonna get some helping hands in here to hold this for me so I can solder it. Okay, so we just want to get that nice and tight on there. So we got the active element here. Okay, you see that? So that's what we're going to solder onto that little pad. And this is going to be our ground package. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to get some flux. Okay, I'm just going to put a little bit of flux on there. not too much. Okay. Push that back. So now we're going to go ahead and solder that together, and then we'll put a little shrink tubing on it. So we're just going to put a little solder here, and then we're just going to real quick add that solder to that ball. We don't want to sit on there very long, because what you do is you end up melting that. That's it. Okay, I have my iron up to 250 degrees Celsius. Okay, and that's done. All right, so now that we've seen that kind of how small it is to work with, that's why I'm drawing it. So you basically have your active element, which is this, and then this is the black insulation covering up that mesh of wire. Okay, so this is the non-active part of your antenna. So that's going to get your antenna up out of your quadcopter canopy. It's going to get it away from the electronics. It's going to stick up a little bit further. It's going to give you a better range. It's going to be a more accurate, undisturbed signal. Okay. So we have that piece. We've already pushed this back onto the black insulation. Okay, and then the active element sticking out, and we just need to just trim off the tip of that. So we're only going to have maybe a few millimeters. We don't want this too long here. Okay, if this element is too long, then you're going to have two active elements, and that's not a good thing. So make sure that this is extremely short, as good as your soldering skills can be, of how short that can be. And then the little bit sticking out here of the center element, and this is what you're going to solder into your pad where that antenna goes into, or used to go into. Okay, so your antenna's gone, it got ripped off or whatever, and then you're going to put a little solder ball where it used to be, and you're only going to push that into that solder ball. Okay, you don't want to push all that in there, because you don't want to risk flowing solder from here to here, and you want this to be really short. Now we have a jumper. We have a 30 gauge. Okay, we're gonna strip the end of that wire, 1/4 of an inch or so, and then we're gonna wrap that. So we're gonna have our jumper wire come in here, and that strip is gonna wind around here. Okay, and then that jumper is gonna come up out of here, and wherever that needs to go, it's going to go to ground. Okay? So wherever that needs to go, for the antenna that I built tonight, I made that jumper really long so it can be cut to a designated length that it needs to be to find a ground. On this board, it's pretty simple. There's a ground pad right there. Okay? There's a positive and a ground pad right here. And then on the Mobula 6, or my pick anyway, the VTX pad, okay? So the VTX has these two little pads on each side. You have to just kind of look around on the board. If you have to, you can take it right to the ground of the battery lead. Wherever you need to find a ground, there's going to be ground pads all over the place, and that's where that little jumper needs to go. So that way, that element it's going to eliminate the signal. It's only going to come out of here. So that does, 2.4 gigahertz. Okay. So this is going to allow you to get that antenna up out of your canopy. Right now, the way they design it is that this active element is basically down here like that. And as you know, with any quadcopter you build, you want that active element away from your electronics. You want it. I mean, obviously on these little whoops, it's a little different. But when you're pushing a 3S toothpick or something with these little all-in-one receivers, You don't want that active element inside the frame, inside the electronics, wrapped around other things, or bent around, because it ruins your signal. So if you want to have a very good signal, you need to get that element out and away. And this is how you do it. And then you just take some heat shrink tubing, put some heat shrink tubing around that, and cinch that down, because you do not want that ground ball accidentally touching other components, because these boards are really tight. So this has insulation here. You put some heat shrink here. All this is insulated. All this is insulated, so you don't have to worry about it. But I hope that this helps out, gives you a good idea of how you can, fix that antenna, or even modify to make it even better, whatever the case may be. But I think a lot more people are going to be in the same shoe of, getting it torn off and not knowing how to fix it. But I hope that this video helps. It was kind of difficult for me to try to translate this and how it works, because I don't really want to go into in-depth radio frequencies and how all that works. This is the modified way, and the unmodified way is just simply snip the active part off and solder it in, and you're done. So if this video helped you out, give me a thumbs up. If it did, subscribe. If it didn't and you hated it, give me a thumbs down. It all works. Enjoy the breeze.